Welcome back to the Director's Garage. I am your host and resident idiot, Michael, and today, folks, we're doing something a little different. Now, I'm going to present a conversation I had this weekend with Danny McKinney, one of the founders of Raal Requisite, the company that figured out how to shove a ribbon driver into a headphone and make it sing. Well, his latest creation is the Immanis, a 3-ribbon driver headphone that is drawing tremendous praise in the head-fi community. So, how did this conversation happen? Cue transition. Every month, for those of you not in the know, I hold a private Zoom meetup called the Hangover Hangout. What else would it be, right? It's a way for us to all interact and talk. Everyone has cameras, and we can all see each other and speak to each other. To get in, you have to join my Patreon for $3 a month. I'm stealing from you guys. All right, well, each month I attempt to book an interesting guest. I've had Zach from ZMF, Audeze reps, Ray Samuels, Ryan Dietz from Modhouse, Kai Moulton from Noble Audio, and many others. So it's a way to connect with the people who create the products that we've come to love. And we get to learn about their companies and ask them a bunch of questions. Well, last Saturday, my guest was Danny McKinney, and he requested to post his session on the Raal website. So as long as this thing's going to go public anyway, I thought it would make a nice holiday gift for you guys and to all of you who supported the channel for so many years to give this one away for free. So this meeting ran well over 3 hours, but Danny's segment was only an hour of that. So I'm presenting this interview in its entirety. The only additions I've made are some photos of the products that we're talking about. So with that, sit back and enjoy our conversation. First of all, thank you for joining us. We had some drop-offs because it's been a long morning, but this will be taped and replayed to the rest of the crowd too, so they'll be able to check it out.
Great, excellent.
I did want to first just ask, how did you get started with Raal Audio?
Oh, that happened a long time ago. Probably around 04.
Wow.
Was when Alex and I think it was about 04, maybe 05, right in there. But Alex was a manufacturer of ribbon tweeters. And I've been in the audio business now. This is my 50th year. And I've owned studios. I've owned several manufacturing companies that make products. Primarily for recording studios, not so much hi-fi. So I was doing a studio in Los Angeles, and the client, he asked me to design a custom monitor for the room. So I started looking around, and I wanted to find, the best components I could for this particular client. And I ran into the Raal ribbon tweeters. And from that, Alex and I developed a very good friendship. And then we went on to do several projects together over the years. And at one point, the wood shop that I use, I introduced him to a fellow named Dr. C. And Dr. C is the engineer that designs all the Audeze stuff. And so our wood shop, Jesse, he designed the wood rings for Audeze headphones, and to this day he's made all the wood rings. And probably after he'd been doing it about a year or two, I called Alex, because I see Jesse all the time. In fact, I just left the wood shop this morning. That's where I had to be. And so I'd see Jesse, 2 or 3 times a month. We're always working on something. And at one point, he started getting really busy making all these rings. And he's like, man, I can't believe it. I've got another 500 rings to make for Audeze. Got another 800 to make. And it's like, wow, that is amazing. So in 2010, in one of the conversations with Alex, I says, hey, bro, what we need to do, because at this point we'd done several projects together. And I says, man, we have got to look into the world of headphones. It's incredible. It's like it's entering a renaissance where headphones are no longer kind of just a utility device when speakers are not available. They used to be kind of like that. Headphones were never really a big deal, but I could see they were becoming a big deal. So I told Alex this in 2010, and he said, he goes, there might be a way to make ribbons work as a full range transducer, at sufficient levels that they'd be a great driver for headphones. And so we worked on it back and forth, and 8 years later, it took 8 years. 8 years later, he calls me up and he says, I have it. You got to hear these. So he came all the way from Serbia to my place out here in Ventura, California. And we sat down. It was the original SR1. Mm-hmm. And it was so funny because I kind of played a dirty trick on him. He gave me the headphones and goes, check these out. And he's very proud. He was really happy with them. So I'm listening, and instantly I recognized that, hey, there's something really, really special going on here. Yeah. But I kept a very straight face. I never smiled, I just kind of was like, unaffected by them. And I was making him sweat, I could see him watching me. He's come all the way from Serbia, and I know he's confident in his work, but I was playing it really, really cool. And finally, it's like, hey man, what is it? What's up? Are they any good or not? And I started laughing. I says, Alex, they sound fantastic. So from there, we took them out to remember Rocky Mountain Audio Fest.
Right.
That was, I think, the last Rocky Mountain. I'm pretty sure. And we took them out. It was like October of 2018. And they were a tremendous hit. We had 3 separate lines of people waiting to come by and hear these headphones. And when you think about it, that's really understandable, because for decades, there's really been 3 basic motors for headphones: dynamic, planar, and E-stat.
Right.
And here we are, these new guys coming out. I mean, I'd been in audio forever. Alex had always been doing it. But here we are, 2 guys outside of the headphone circles. And we're coming in with a completely revolutionary motor design. It hadn't been done before. If it has, after all this time, we still haven't found an example of a working ribbon headphone prior to the SR1. So it was kind of a big deal in the sense of introducing an entirely new motor technology to the world of headphones.
Wow. What did you find the ribbon to do particularly well that maybe some of these other motors, as you put them, didn't do?
Well, there's setting the motor technology aside, there was one other thing that made the SR so revolutionary. AKG had originally done the K1000, which was a on-ear speaker kind of design. And there are certain advantages to that. What's nice about the ribbon is you can set your free air resonance. Your only limitation is how loud do you want to play. You can take a ribbon all the way down to DC. It'll play super, super low, where dynamic planar and E-stats will not play so low. So they need, they will play low if they're in a closed environment and they're able to get assist from cabin effect.
Yeah.
Yes, they do play low, but they play low under that condition. A ribbon will play low without that. It won't play as low or as at a higher volume because you're going to get bass loss because it's dipole. But it's a long way from what the AKG was able to do because that was a dynamic driver. And a dynamic driver is going to have a free air resonance of 150 cycles. The ribbon we can take right down to 40 cycles. It'll even go lower. And of course, you're going to lose some to the baffle being open, like on an SR1. But what you gain from that open baffle, so I'm putting this in addition to being a ribbon itself, which is very, very fast, very quick to start and stop. That's what I mean by being fast. Mm-hmm. And it's not subject to the artifacts of a closed headphone. In other words, you don't have one note bass. Bass is not a function of the space with, in that environment, bass doesn't really reveal timbre and pitch so much. It's just a visceral low frequency, a recognition that there's something going on down in the bottom. Where the ribbon being in an open baffle really hits timbre and pitch beautifully. May not be very robust in terms of quantity,
right? But
the way it speaks is exceptionally good. So there were just a lot of advantages to the SR1, or a lot of, let's say, unique characteristics that just simply were never available on any other headphone up to that point. I love that technology. I think it's fantastic.
I'm a big fan, as you can tell. I've got a vintage ribbon right here doing the pickup here. And
RCA 77?
Yeah, it's a classic, and I love this thing. It's been on my show for years now. Since the beginning. I decided on when I was looking for a microphone to do this environment, I wanted something that was classic, but still the sonics were exceptional. I just love the sound of this. The tone of
I
these
do too.
is
I
phenomenal.
love them. Those old RCAs, and Western Electric made a really nice ribbon microphone.
Yep.
I think one of the best examples of that microphone, there's a singer from the mid 50s through mid 60s named Blossom Deary. She used to record with that. She's actually possibly one of maybe my favorite female vocalist of all time. She always recorded with that Western Electric ribbon microphone.
Beautiful.
And it's sensational because it's very exposed. It's usually just her on the piano singing with maybe double bass, sometimes guitar, rarely with drums, but it's very, very open recording, and you can really get an idea of how fantastic those early ribbon microphones were.
They're still amazing to this day. That's why I champion.
Yes.
Want to push us forward to the Immanis now. You've got you had the Requisite, correct? And that was the single ribbon?
Single ribbon, both the SR1, and we followed that up with one called the CA1, which was a circumaural version of the ribbon.
Okay.
And there was a need to go through that evolution, because just like a ribbon microphone, you recognize that you have to be very careful not to blast it with air.
Yeah.
Because if you do, it'll shred the ribbon.
Yep.
It'll destroy, and it'll have to be it'll need a new ribbon. That's all there's to it. Those things, I built my first recording studio in 1977.
Wow.
I owned studios for 30 years. I was a professional double bassist and electric bassist. I worked in Los Angeles all that time, very active in the recording world. And those microphones, I remember when we used to put them away in the sock, you'd have to be careful sliding them into their sock, because if you did it too fast, it again would shred the ribbon. Well, that's the concern Alex and I had when we started with the SR1. We made it very open and dipole like that for several reasons, but one of them was we were very concerned that if you took a Circumaral headphone, with pads all the way around, and you put it on your head too fast,
pressure.
There's that air pressure, and we were very concerned that they would get torn up. So we did the SR1, I think, for 3.5, maybe 4 years. It was our only product, because that whole time we knew that to get the kind of bass that people are used to, in a headphone, right, we would eventually have to go Circumaral. So there was a lot of time spent in trying to create the mechanics of a headphone that would not blow out ribbons if you put them on too quickly, or like say maybe you let them go and they snapped, quick to your head.
ESTAT lovers suffer this all the time.
Yes, exactly. So we had to get past that stage. Now, the reason I walked you through that is because originally, back in 2010, Alex and I were already talking about a triple ribbon headphone. That was already in consideration in 2010. The problem was how to make it work in a robust way where it would actually not just be something that you had on your test bench that kind of worked, like a DIY project. It had to be ready for an audience, a world audience that had real life, kids running through the house and putting them on and playing with things, or
right,
whatever comes up. So it took a lot of, I guess you'd call it due diligence to go through all of those things, because we're dealing with a system that had never been done before. We didn't know. Perfect example is, how when how like if you're cooking at home, you're going to make a baked potato, and you take your roll of foil and you pull it off the roll and you go to cut it. The whole time that thing is making noise, the aluminum.
Right.
All kinds of noise. We had to deal with that. I've never had anybody here say to me, "Oh, wow, I love the ribbon sound, but it's that crinkle that's driving me nuts." Alex sat there and worked and worked and worked and figured out a way to allow that driver not to just vibrate, say, from 2,000 cycles and up as a tweeter, but actually from 20K all the way down to 20 cycles, and not make all that crinkly noise or get bent or stretched completely out of its elastic set point where we had the right frequency response. That was a lot of work.
Huge challenges.
Huge, yeah. But Alex is a brilliant guy. He is also a patient guy, and he'll sit there and work on it till it's right. And the Immanis was talked about in 2010. It wasn't until 2024, so 14 years later, that it was actually a product. And I just got a thing the other day. Somebody did a survey of audio gear, and I was just sent to me yesterday or the day before, and on it, this is a user poll, and Immanis was the number one best headphone of 2024 based on user voting. I don't know if anything's ever the best of anything, but it's developed and matured to the point where, you know, it's recognized as a fine audio device.
It's also a beautiful device.
Thank you. Yeah.
Did you have, when you go to 3 drivers, timing becomes a problem, or becomes a challenge, I should say, right? Because you've got 3 sources putting out audio waves, and you get 3 waves, they're going to start canceling each other out all over the place at different resonances and frequencies. What was the challenge like to get 3 drivers into one cup? And I got to open it up to my guys too, because they've been waiting around for hours to ask questions. But I have so many myself. I'm going to be a little selfish here. Talk about the challenge of 3 drivers versus 1 driver.
Precisely. Yes. You know, the same way that it introduces a challenge of what I think basically what we're talking about here is coherency. Coherency, that all 3 drivers are delivering information to the ear in a way that is musically relevant. Aside from that challenge, the 3 ribbons also presented a really cool opportunity. And it turned out that I suspect that the solution or answer to both was in one single thing. Anytime you have a device that resonates, which is basically everything in the world, the sidewalk resonates at some particular frequency. You're going to have some peak resonance.
Of course.
And so that's speakers, and that is sliding glass doors, it's whatever. So when you have one driver, dynamic, planar, E-stat, ribbon, you're going to have one spot that's going to be a peak resonance. One that's going to be hotter than all the others, just the way it is. I think what's led to part of, you wouldn't necessarily come to this conclusion without thinking about it. It's not something that just pop in your head. But when you do think about it, you have 3 drivers, and they're going to put out more output than 1 driver. But where the opportunity lies is in that, and by the way, I should back up a little bit and say that ribbons, the way we tune them is by how much tension there is.
Right.
Well, that tensioning sets the free air resonance, and it also sets wherever that peak frequency is going to be, the peak resonance. Well, that makes an opportunity now where you can do what we're doing in this. We call it complementary tuning.
Got it. I can see.
Rather than tuning all 3 drivers exactly the same, because if you do that, they're all going to share the same peak resonance. It's kind of like the modes. If you're a 2-channel guy and you've got a listening room, you do not want a room that's 10 by 10 by 10, because all the modes are going to be at the same frequency and they're just going to pile up on each other. So you want a room that's maybe 10 by 14 with an 18-foot ceiling, whatever, but you don't want all the same dimensions. So same with the drivers here on Immanis. We want complementary tuning so that the peak resonance of one ribbon is different than the other, and the third one is different than those 2. And we want to spread them out in a way that's complementary, hence the name complementary tuning. So that's what's going on there. And what it does is, instead of having one very strong peak, you have 3 smaller peaks, because with 3 ribbons, you've got more output. You're moving more air, but you're not peaking all at the same spot.
Brilliant.
And getting that right, getting the complementary tuning right, was kind of like it. I don't know if the complementary tuning itself, but it seems that by doing that, we've not had any issues in terms of coherency. It's probably because they're close enough together that really helps. There is no real difference or significant difference other than, say, like a millimeter or something between them in terms of where their voice is and where they're physically set to your ear canal or the ear itself. So they just do what they do, and it just happens to sound very, very good.
Wow. Incredible. Gene, I'm going to let you jump in here. You've been patient. These guys have been patient with me today.
Hey, great. Glad to hear from you guys.
And both of these guys, by the way, are wearing their Immanis today, just so you know.
Well, if it's Gene, that has to be Gene Fruit.
It is Gene Fruit, yes. Hi, Danny. Good to see you once again.
Hi, Gene.
We've spent a few hours over multiple can jams talking about the wonderful line, and I really think the Immanis has really been the latest and greatest, and I'm looking forward to there being future technologies using these ribbon drivers. What would be happening next from Raal? I know this is already, a fairly new headphone, but there's always the next thing that's going to be coming. What do we think is next?
Well, we do have a whole lineup of stuff that is set to happen, but kind of like in the development of the first headphones, it generally takes us a long time. But the most immediate thing that we have coming is an amplifier. And my hope is that I'd love to be able to show it at New York Can Jam, but I don't think that's realistic. But we might be able to show it in Munich, which is a couple of months after the New York Can Jam. New York is February, and then you got March, April, and Munich is in May.
Oh, May.
So I think we might be able to show this new amplifier in Munich in May, maybe. If it doesn't happen there, maybe it'll happen at SoCal Can Jam, which is shortly after that, or Dallas after that. We'll see. But there's been a lot of work on a new amplifier. In terms of headphones, what will probably come after the amplifier, I'm giving you these things in order of where I think they'll appear. Oh, I hear my phone ringing, and it sounds like the ringer I have for Alex. I told him if I didn't pick up, it's because I was busy with this interview. In terms of headphones, we're the SR1, when it came out, it was SR stands for studio reference, and what we were trying to accomplish with the SR was to make a headphone that recording engineers could mix records, or mastering engineers could master their records using that headphone, because it really does eliminate the variances of rooms and reflections and things like that. And it turned out to be a really tremendously helpful studio tool. Though the bulk of the sales are to audiophiles, quite a lot of very significant audio engineers have bought these. And last year there was an engineer, Helge Sten in Oslo, Norway, who mixed and mastered a classical album using just the SR1 headphones, and he received the Grammy this year for Best Engineered Classical Record. I hope I'm saying that right. Maybe it's a different category, but I think that's what it was. And I was asking him about it, and I said, now, when you did this in conjunction with speakers and everything? He goes, no, I mix and master exclusively on the SR1 headphone. So what we're doing now is we're working, the next headphone's going to be what's called the SR Pro. And that will be a multi-ribbon but open baffle headphone like the SR1 was, but it'll be multi-ribbon. So that's the next headphone that's in the lineup.
And what was the time frame on it?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What was the time frame on it?
Oh, it'll be sometime after the amplifier. Let's say we're able to get the amplifier out in May for Munich. Well, I would think then if that's out in May, then maybe sometime between 6 months and a year from now.
Okay.
Something like that. And SR Pro meaning studio reference for professionals. And it'll have a little bit more of an aesthetic that is more of a pro kind of thing, where, in a studio, sometimes you're in a work environment, so it wouldn't have, say, wood on it, because the wood is more, it's more comfortable to have wood in a home environment than, say, in a studio environment. So it'll just have some more industrial type aesthetics to it, but it'll have a 3-motor and it will be open baffle.
Okay.
For amplification, do you think that solid state is the way to go, or is tube amplification something that's useful on a ribbon?
Wow, that's a great question, and my answer is going to be a subjective answer.
Okay.
Personally, I don't have enough time in my life for solid state amps. Listening time is so precious, and I'm probably not going to spend it on a solid state amp. Now, that's not to say that's my subjective answer. The objective answer is, of course, there are some really good solid state amplifiers out there, and I'm looking for a solid state amp for me to take with me on the shows. Currently, aside from Raal, I happen to also sell Viva amplifiers and Felix amplifiers. Mm-hmm. Those happen to be tube amps. I'm on a search for a good solid state amp. And when I say that, by the way, I don't mean that there aren't any good solid state amps right now. I think there are some really good ones. I just haven't found one that I want to represent right now. I will. I'm looking. My listening preference is vacuum tube amplifiers. For myself, my favorite amp so far with the Immanis has been the Viva 2A3. I started carrying those amps because of that specifically. I love that combination. For me, it's the right balance. But occasionally someone will say something to me like, well, I listen to EDM most of the time, and the tube sound is a little too gentle for me. I want something, that's really going to punch and, hit. And for that, you're probably either better off with a push-pull style tube amp, like our old VM1, or like a solid state amp. And there's some good solid state amps. I really like the Massdrop. I think it's a very nice amp. I like Riviera. By the way, I don't mean to leave anybody out. If I don't mention stuff,
no, it's all right.
I don't like them. But amps that come to mind: Riviera, Massdrop. There's a new amp out of Italy. I want to start carrying, and I want to take to some shows. It's by a company called Audeze, and it has a crossfeed feature on it, which I've not been too impressed with most crossfeed.
Me neither.
Features. Yeah, I love the concept of it, but I haven't been able to appreciate the execution of it. It just hasn't worked. But the Audeze, I think it's called an HPA1. I'm not sure, but it has a crossfeed feature that in a show environment, I say all of this with, I'm trying to frame it correctly, but under the show circumstances I heard, I really liked it. I right now I'm interested in doing that. I just did a private event in Denver last weekend. In fact, a week ago today, and I wanted to take the Audma to that show, but was unable to get one in time for the show. Hopefully, I'll be able to have them by New York. That shouldn't be a problem. But what I heard, I really like that amplifier. And of course, there are other solid states as well. The CFA, that's a nice amp. That new CFA. Big head amp makes that one.
Yes.
Really nice. Good quality. So there's a number of really, really good ones out there. No doubt about it.
Very good. Jonathan, did you want to jump in?
I guess this is a question that I think a lot of people have already asked is, Raal 1995 is like, I guess, Alex's baby. What is your relationship to that specific company? And first off, good to talk to you again. I mean, I've spent hours talking with you as well.
Yeah, Raal Requisite was something that Alex and I had been doing for a number of years, even before Ribbon headphones, like with omnidirectional speaker systems and some studio monitors and things like that. With Raal 1995, that is strictly Alex's baby. I am just the North American, South American distributor for those products. That's all I do, and that works out really well for a number of reasons. I'm extremely happy with that arrangement, and it works really well for Alex. There are a number of logistical problems that would come up in our old arrangement because me being here in California and doing worldwide sales, that's a huge job. That's a job for 10 guys. And now under our new arrangement, we now have about 10 guys doing that job. So I can handle North America, no problem. Canada all the way down to Brazil, no problem. That's great. But, like doing shows in Singapore or China, or the number of times I go to Europe in a year, it's not a very pleasant life doing that. It's really hard, and it's hard to be when there's so many logistical difficulties. It's hard to put your energy fully into the real work at hand, representing the product and getting it to people and doing all the shows. Also, as a consequence, I'm able to do a lot more shows in the US than I was when I was doing all those other shows. So this divides it up just beautifully.
Appreciate it. I'm thoroughly enjoying mine, and really can't speak highly enough. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to. I wrote a lengthy review on HeadFi about it, but
right.
I guess what is a question, because I know that the mid-range is going to be the most divisive for the Immanis. What was the thinking behind the tunings? I guess more specifically with the mid-range.
Well, it's very interesting on the mid-range. There are some people, of course, that the comment I've heard is that the mid-range is a little more recessed. Some people are comfortable with it. I'm pretty comfortable with it myself, but I can understand anybody that would say that. The thing that you always have to remember, and this is something I learned as a recording engineer of over 30 years, sound in the atmosphere that is supported by air has a much bigger bandwidth, would be the wrong word, but in terms of energy in all directions, sound in air is a completely different thing than when you're trying to make a recording. The media of recording is that it's kind of like if you were to looking through a telescope. You can get a great deal of focus on an object, but with a telescope, you're not going to get a 360-degree view of the world. You can get a focus. And because that focus is so narrow, that when you have something like the Immanis, where you've got this very wide kind of panoramic sound field. It's a very big, when people listen to it, one thing they do say is it sounds so big. Well, the other thing is that what happens is the bigger any aspect becomes, the smaller something else becomes. You're always dealing with that in a recording. It's just the way it is because it's very small compared to what we hear in real life. If, for instance, if you really dissect a record and how it's made, you'll notice that records generally, not all records, I mean, you can have heavy metal and boom, everybody comes on, it's at 11 for the next 10 minutes, and that's the way it is. But generally, the craft of building a record is you're bringing in instruments and sounds or effects, and generally you don't bring them in more than 2 at a time. God, my phone is ringing like nuts this morning. Sorry about that if you guys are hearing that. So the reason for that is because the ear can only accommodate so much at once. So like, for instance, when you build up a song, you start out with the mellow introduction and you build it up through the verse and the chorus gets giant. Some point of the song, you'll recognize that generally the whole song breaks down again to what it was in the beginning so that they can rebuild it at the end. If you try to keep that whole thing going all the way through, it's not going to be musically dynamic. There might be some peaks and things like that in terms of electronically dynamic, but musically dynamic, you have to do that to keep the ear entertained. That's a long way around of explaining why, to answer your question very specifically, that's why something like the Immanis that has such a big sound field, you have all of that going along competing with the mid-range. It's called masking. You have to be very careful of masking. Masking is what's going on. There are other frequencies. It's not that it doesn't play the middle. It's just that there's so much of everything else that it would appear that way. So that talks to balance of everything going on and the competition for your attention. I personally, of Manus and Magna and Immanis, my favorite is Magna. And every time I talk to people, I always say, well, Magna, man, that's the one I really like. Magna's an incredible headphone. It gets no attention whatsoever. We probably sell one Magna for every 10 or 12 Immanis, and it's $3,000 less. But for most of the stuff I'm going to listen to, which is really small groups and small quartets, things like that, trios, quartets, small stuff, Magna, man, it rules. It's awesome. But if I were listening to a Beethoven symphony and, with incredible bass playing like the, let's say the Berlin Philharmonic, which has probably the best bass section on the planet right now, Immanis is going to blow your socks off because you're going to get all that scale of what it's like to really be in a big concert hall. So there's only so much room in terms of the whole spectrum of energy, whether it be frequency response or dynamic energy, and just the competitions of sounds competing with other sounds. I'll give you an example. An old recording technique is like, usually bass and kick drum often play at the same time on a recording.
Right.
If you listen to a recording, we're using pop music, jazz would be different. But if you're listening to a pop record, a lot of times, if you've got a boom, 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 boom pattern, that's usually the bass guitar playing those notes and a kick drum at the same time. Well, those are two competing things. There's low frequency in the kick drum, there's low frequency in the bass guitar. How do you make them both fit? Because if you're looking at your VU meters, they're going vump, 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 all that energy, and you're really not getting all that much sound, and you're using up all your available space. We're back to the telescope again. We're looking through that narrow thing, and all you can see is this world's biggest kick drum and bass guitar, because they're just sucking all the energy out. So what you would do to avoid this masking and this buildup is you would take a signal off the kick drum and send it to the side chain of a limiter. And that would be the limiter that the bass guitar is plugged into. So when the kick drum hits, the bass guitar gets a limiter or a compressor right at the attack. That's also what helps make them sound so tight. Now, this is old school. They do it differently nowadays because it's all computerized.
Sure.
But you would take in the kick drum, you would hear the attack of the kick drum, and you wouldn't hear the initial hit. I mean, it's there, but it's brought down several dB. So instead of getting this big swing over of all your VU space, you get the kick drum, which comes about halfway, and then as the kick drum fades out, the release on the compressor is letting the pitch of the bass come through. So now you've got both happening at the same time, but you're using the kick drum to trigger the compression of the bass guitar to pull it down so that energy isn't happening all at once. And that's the same process when you have a headphone that has such a big presentation. There's going to be crowding, and that's part of just the payoff of physics.
Wow. Well, I have a 300B amp here that would love to try the the ribbon technology out.
Ooh, yes, I love 300B amps.
Yeah, I've been following Raal. I mean, I heard the SR1 back at Can Jam probably 2020, I want to say.
Wow, yeah, right. Uh-huh.
Maybe earlier than that even. I'm not sure, but
do you remember what city you were in?
It was in LA.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah.
And it was down, it may have even been back when it was not Can Jam, but it was called The Audio Show. THE was the high-end audio show.
I remember it well. Yeah.
And I think you guys had them in a side room there, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, at the time I thought, this is really interesting, but I'm not sure it's something I want all of my music, like it's like a specific use case headphone. I would want these in certain situations, but I don't know if I'd want them every day.
Right.
And I think
it's not your daily driver necessarily.
I think the evolution, though, where you're at is now it's becoming like, oh, this is a headphone I could use whether I'm writing a letter or I'm focused on music or I'm, any of the other things I do around, the office while I'm here. So I think the scope and the application of the headphones have changed over time as well with the ribbon technology. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely fair to say. We are pioneering. It's like we're still looking for the best route. It's like the Oregon Trail.
Yeah.
It's like there weren't any roads to follow to get out to Oregon from, say, Philadelphia or something. They were cutting a path, and that's what Alex and I are doing. Is we're taking something that there has been no path, and we're kind of cutting that path. We're figuring out our way, but I think in doing so, I think we've been really responsible with not cutting a path too hastily. Like I say, Alex and I started talking about this, and I mean, we talked for a long time about this in 2010 until 2018. And then from 2018 to 2024 is when Immanis came out. So we haven't been hasty. You know, we've been plenty of due diligence in trying to cut this path. And so, yeah, it's been long and slow. But I think every time we make a move, we try to do it as a fully flushed out, reliable product. I don't know how many SR1s we sold. It was roughly, let's call it 1,000.
Okay.
It was significant.
Yeah.
And you know that headphone, I could be wrong about this, but I don't recall, because I handle all the warranty stuff. If there's ever a problem, people call me. I don't recall ever having a burnt out ribbon in all of those headphones. Now, we have replaced ribbons because that had that feature where you could slide the cartridge out and see the ribbon. Well, we've had times where people have slid it out and then they've held it by the edge as opposed to the ends. And the edge is kind of a softer F4 epoxy that can be pressed down a little bit. So if you hold it too tight, you'll crush the ribbon. So I've had times where people have crushed the ribbon, or I've had it where people have overpowered it and the ribbon went forward and hit the magnet and put a crease in it. The funny thing is though, most of the time, all you got to do is blow on it like you're whistling. You just go like that, you know, focus your breath right onto where the crinkle is.
Yeah.
And it'll pop right back into shape. But they are, I would almost say that might be the most reliable headphone on the planet, is like the SR1 or the CA. CA wasn't too successful for us, but very, very few failures. Out of hundreds of them, maybe a dozen, I don't know, hardly any. And we think the same with Immanis and Magna. They should turn out to be incredibly reliable headphones.
Terrific.
Yeah, but it's a slow pace of trying to do all the right things and recognize them. But that's why the development is slow. But that's just Alex's nature. I've worked with engineers like crazy, design engineers. I had a company, we made these giant recording consoles for recording music and for film. Giant, you know, $250,000 boards. And there were lots of engineers involved, lots of people. I've done this my whole life, 50 years now. Alex is probably in totality one of the top 3 or 4 engineers I've ever known in my life. He's great, he's smart, and he's really diligent. And so when he does something and he's going to bring it out for use, it's going to be really ready. And if there is a problem, he's extremely good at correcting it. We were having some, probably the only trouble we've ever had with the product is with the Star 8 cable. There's right at the yoke where the cable splits off for the ear part. We were getting failures on that, probably at the rate of like 10%, which is huge. That's ridiculous. Yeah. So it's worked on, and now it's fabulous. We get 0 problems with it. But if you have something that does have a problem and we're aware of it, which we are because we always hear from customers, it's fixed immediately. But before something goes out, Alex is extremely thorough.
Very good. Very good. Fellas, you got anything else while we're in our remaining moments here?
No, I mean, the recommendations that you've made. So, I've heard you make a recommendation of Blossom Deary prior. I think you made that that recommendation directly to me. But I also know you are a big, huge fan of, like, we had talked, one of the many times we had talked about Rycooter.
Yes.
And I know for myself, listening to instrument like guitar on the Immanis and Magna have been quite an experience. I really love the timbre that comes out of it. Spatial presentation aside, I think the timbre for that specific instrument, the guitars, are just wonderful.
They really are. One thing that is critical for me is acoustic instruments. With Rye, I've worked with Rye now for about 30 years. I consider him one of the very best friends I've ever had. He's a wonderful human being, and I am in his presence many, many times. Sometimes it's just he and I in a room, and he might play guitar. I remember I found an old 1930s Gibson L5 guitar for him, and it was like in pristine condition. And I picked it up in Cambria, California, and brought it down to him in his house in Santa Monica. And the guitar looks like it was built yesterday. And the problem with that is he picked it up and he played it, and it sounded terrible. And that's because it hadn't been played. It just sat in a case for, 70 years. So we opened it up in the living room. We sat there, and Rye played that thing for 2 or 3 hours for me, just sitting there. I'm the only audience, and I'm hearing that. And eventually, after a couple, 3 hours, that guitar opened up. When he first started doing it, you could hardly hear it. By the time it was over, he had a pretty big house. You could hear it everywhere in the house once the guitar started opening up. But the point of that is that I've had opportunities to sit there in the absolute first generation acoustic event where I'm there next to the instrument. That's the whole thing that happened to me my whole life in my recording career. You're in a room and you're listening to the voice of the singer or the sound of the guitar or the cello. You know what it sounds like. You get back in the control room. Has it changed in any way? Is it different? It's crazy. If there's some issue that happens between the instrument and the microphone and what you're getting in the control room, you've got to make adjustments for what it is you're hearing. So with the sound of Immanis, like, you mentioning that you like it on guitar, one thing that's really great is when you're real familiar with the sound of a true acoustic instrument, you can really make evaluations on your equipment that you're listening to, whether it's you're testing an amp, a cable, a headphone. Acoustic instruments will really help you a lot. The reason I like, there's many reasons why I like Blossom Deary, but one of them is and why I recommend her to audiophiles is because generally her vocal and piano is one microphone. It's that Western Electric ribbon mic, and you're hearing something that should, when you're listening to it, sound like there is a human being right there. If you're listening to the headphones, it should sound like they're right there in your head, that they're whispering in your ear. It should sound that way, and that's kind of a good yardstick of judging the quality of the timbre of what you're hearing. So acoustic instruments are always kind of acoustic instruments, and exposed vocal is always kind of like the litmus test for a good product. Definitely you want to make sure that you're able to hear complexities in music, in big orchestras or heavy metal band, whatever it is, with lots of dense information. Yes, that's critical, but unless you're able to go all the way down to what I would call the roots, a guitar and a voice, something like that, something so broken down, a piano and a voice. I think of those things as like, I look for audio devices to be what I call a time machine. I want to actually hear a performance that occurred 30, 40, 50 years ago, or even yesterday, but recreated for me today. That's what I'm looking for my audio equipment to do, is act like a time machine. If you were to actually be able to re-energize the air the same way the original sound did, but it was in the past, and you could actually recreate that energy in a room. That's like a time machine. You're actually bringing back the past. You're creating that event. You're sitting in it, you're there for it. So I'm glad to hear that you're recognizing the guitar sounds and things of being so lifelike and representing reality to a close way. The high fidelity, hi-fi. The word fidelity basically means truth, high truth, or you could say high accuracy. That's what we're looking for, is the truth, and that's what we're hopefully bringing. In these headphones or any amps that we may do, that's what we're hoping for.
That's why I'm such a fan of tape. I'm such a tape head. I just love reel to reel, and I love what it's brought back. You get in that, you have that moment of, wow, this is as close to the recording studio as you can get. When you've got a one-off, the original tape master, it's like, wow, it's special.
I'll tell you a story. When I was 12 years old, I got introduced into open reel tape. By the time I was 14, I had an Ampex 351 vacuum tube 2-track tape recorder, 10 and a half inch reels.
I hope you still have it.
I do not, although I picked one up for Rye a few years ago, and he has one. So okay. I guess I have access to one. But when I was a kid growing up, I did buy vinyl records, but also you could join, remember the old record clubs they had?
Oh, yeah.
Well, you could join a tape club. I probably still have, they're at my mom's house. I bet I have a couple of hundred manufactured reels of the albums.
Yeah, I have them too. Yeah, and that's what I grew up with. I had a turntable, and I had a magnetic reel, and I had some Ampex speakers. I forget the exact number of them, but they were like a suitcase. And you take the front door off, and you have your full range speaker, and inside was a tube amplifier, a pair of 6V6s, maybe giving you 10 watts. And that was my system. That was my reference. That's what I grew up with. Wow.
Yeah, it made me very fussy about sound.
Great stuff.
It is great stuff, yeah.
So fun. Well, I'm going to let you go because I don't want to keep you all day, and I know you've got calls to take and stuff, but this has been an absolute joy. And I hope I get a chance to check out your gear on the show, because that would be an amazing thing to review and check out. I had a really positive experience with them at Can Jam, but limited in the room,
Yes.
Always limited where the location.
What city are you in?
I'm in LA. I'm in Studio City. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. I'm sure we could work out somewhere. I could send some gear to you, come by and pick it up or whatever.
That'd be great. That'd be fun.
The next couple of months are rough, but maybe after that, by all means, someone was waving at me over there. I'm on like a boardwalk. I'm out here. I don't know if you can see it. But
Yeah, I can tell.
it's kind of like a sidewalk where everybody walks in, and I've been here for so long, I kind of almost know everybody. I'm always out here. We can get together and do that. You can come out and visit or whatever. I'd be glad to have you. And also, by the way, before I take off here, do you guys have any ideas or suggestions or things that we could do? Because, we don't want to be like in our own little bubble. It's really nice to know what is interesting out there. What do you think is good products or something that should be considered or refined more deeply to make the whole experience better? Are there things that are missing these days? What are we looking for?
Oh,
I'll throw an idea out there. If you would have interest in helping other amplifier builders incorporate the transformer interface internal into their amplifiers instead of them being a standalone product. So then you wouldn't necessarily need to bring an amplifier to market, and instead you would be able to simply provide them that feature within their own amplifiers, and they can go deal with all that, working with the topology and all those sales. And then you could just simply represent their product rather than trying to enter into the amplifier space again when it comes to everything that brings.
Well, that's a really good point. And in fact, Alex and I have had a lot of talks about, amplifiers lead to a whole nother division of your energy.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Going off in that direction. And that's a really good point. The issue with getting other builders to build for our needs is an interesting one, and we've actually done it now 3 times. The first project I did was with Jason over at Shit Audio, and we came out with what they call the Jotunheim R.
Yep.
That was a really successful project. I sold hundreds of them. I think they sold hundreds of them. Really, they did such a fabulous job at such a fabulous price, which is typical of that company. In fact, I have a DAC here right now that they make that is really, really good. It's like $2,800, and it's really
their value for dollars and cents.
Yes, it's fantastic, and they deserve all the success they have. It's a great company. I love those guys. And then we also did the HSA amplifier, which was built by SAEQ under our brand name, but that was the company building it. And then also we had the VM, which was also a direct drive amplifier. It's funny, both of those, all 3 of those amps were really successful. There's kind of interesting things about it. I like that when we're able to do it, but the ways to do it require sometimes a completely different style of amplifier. As an example, with the tube amp, like with the VM, you can do that by having an output transformer with a 0.4 ohm secondary winding. And great, man, problem is solved. You can do it with tubes and it's not that big of a deal. With the solid state amp, of course, with general topology, they really kind of 4 ohms is about as deep as they go. But there are certain topologies that'll basically let you go down to 0 ohms and they'll be fine. The HSA was that way, and the Jotunheim R was that way. You could direct drive them to the load of at that time, which was an SR1 and a CA, which is a 0.2 ohm load. Unless that topology is there, their only option which is why we have it, is the RCD interface,
Right.
which is a transformer. I happen to love transformers. They can be done poorly, and they could be like an stand in the way of good quality sound. There's no doubt about it. Anytime you're dealing with a transformer, you're actually converting one form of energy into another. So transducers, like headphones are a transducer. They convert electrical energy into acoustic energy. A microphone converts acoustic energy into electrical energy. So a mic is a transducer, the headphones are a transducer, and a lot of times you need transformers to deal with transducers. And so with the Immanis, Magna, or any of our ribbon headphones, for most amplifier topologies, you're going to need an RCD, a transformer, to transform the output impedance of the amplifier to the load impedance of the headphone. And that's all it's doing. So in the beginning, when we came out, the SR1 needed a 100 watt amplifier because we used a resistor interface. Basically, we're taking raw power and converting it into heat. That's another form of transformation. and it was ridiculous. It really was. And when I talked to Jason about doing an amp for us from Shit, that took something and made it a completely free. You free of the requirement. You can just plug the thing directly into it. Very, very good. Some people would argue that, maybe that Shit amp wasn't ideal sonically. I mean, it wasn't what you would call like top quality sound, but it was really, really good. They did a really good job on it. Certainly bang for buck was ridiculous. So I'm not sure where an amplifier company would have enough. Amplifier companies are like anybody. They're looking for the right number of features at a certain cost that is bearable to the consumer, where it seems like it's a good value. I think that ribbon headphones are still a little bit kind of like e-stats.
Yeah.
They're kind of their own world.
Side hustles.
Yeah, if you're going to have an e-stat, you're going to have an energizer. And it just goes along with the technology. And at this time, I don't see a solution other than making a purpose-built amp or having the RCD interface, which I think is a really good solution.
Well, I was thinking more of your custom amp manufacturers offering it as an option on their commissioned builds. I mean, for example, if we look at that B21 that Ray Samuels has put out, it has the electrostatic interface in it, and one could say,
beautiful amp, by the way. I like that.
Right here.
There could be an option that if there's people that would rather have the interface for the Raal headphone instead of an electrostat in it, that would be something where he could develop, a circuit working with you and say, okay, this is what it needs to complete, and clearly would be able to build something, and then it would have that interface built into it as an option. I'm not saying he needs to necessarily go out and craft a whole new amplifier and have a whole new product line that you have to manage. And I'm thinking the same thing with like head amp with their CFA3 that they're bringing out various iterations of. There was an iteration that would have the interface with the Raal instead of being solely for traditional headphones. Have a combination platform there that could be because he's semi-custom with those builds as well.
Yeah, he's very he makes it easy to kind of dial in for your personal preferences.
Yeah.
Right now, on a technology side, the only thing that I can think of that would be available to those guys would simply be that they would use the same transformers we use in the RCD, and put those inside their box.
Right.
They're
clean.
most likely, because of the topology, the amp needing to see something above 4 ohms. The way to that is going to be through the putting those transformers internally. So the electronic solution is no different than the solution we have now. It's just an issue of packaging.
Sure.
And then, of course, you're paying for that transformer set in that particular amp, but now it doesn't work on any of your other amps.
Right.
The way we have it now, any amp that you have that's 8 or 32 ohms, you can plug it into any headphone amp that has 3 or more watts available to drive it to full SPL. So the way we have it now, it's like it'll work with all your amps, assuming, like I say, that they have 3 watts. Or where if we do put it inside of somebody's amp, and if they want to do it, we'd be happy, by the way, to provide those to people. I'm sure if somebody really wanted to do that, Alex would be happy to supply the components and things to allow them to do that.
Okay.
I don't want to speak for Alex. Oh, wow. Hold on. Hey, Monaj. I didn't realize that was you. Hey, I'm doing a podcast right now, but as soon as I'm done, man, I'll hook up with. Have you been calling? Okay. Oh, probably 5 minutes. We're almost done. Thanks, bro. That's why my phone kept ringing. Monaj, he's the guy that loaned me this shit DAC, which sounds great. He was going to come by to pick it up today, and we've been talking, and he's actually sitting on a park bench across like 30 feet away.
Amazing.
And I'm waving at him, but from here I couldn't see who it was. That's great. All right, guys, I guess that really is the end for me.
All right, then.
Fair
Sounds
enough.
good.
Hey, I'm so glad that you guys included me on this. Thank you very much. I hope
appreciate you
we
being
got
here.
to, as well, we did get into as many questions as we could, but if you guys ever need anything from me or want to come out and visit, man, let me know. I really enjoy talking with the audiophile community. It's awesome group. It's really been like the joy of my whole career is hanging out in these kind of situations.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and I hope you all got as much out of it as we did here. And we'll check back with you in the future, and maybe talk for when you get your amp ready, and we can come on and talk about that too.
Oh, I would love it. Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic.
In fact, Michael, let's you and I try and hook up after this sometime. I need to, know more about what you're doing, find out ways that I can contribute, to whatever's going on. I'm happy to be a resource for you if you need something.
Fabulous. Appreciate it, man. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it for today. And thank you guys for joining us on the Hangout. So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Danny from Raal Audio. Gotta thank him for stopping by. Now, if you'd like to take part in future discussions, head over to Patreon and subscribe. You'll get links to all of the past Hangover Hangouts, all those guests, and invites to future sessions. Give this episode a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, or you can do the other thing if that's what you're into. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of this stuff, because in our next episode, we're going to be doing a shootout between the Noble Audio Apollo and the Focal Batiste. You won't want to miss that one. That episode is already in production. All right, thanks for stopping by the garage today, and I will see you before you know it.
Let's all get drunk. It's a day at the